Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahavidyan Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome to our webcast of our Saturday morning class on Shankaracharya's Atma Bodha. We continue in this topic from verses 39 to 47. In that topic, we're discussing the fruits of self-knowledge, which is to say the goal that we seek through our study of Vedanta, through our process of self-inquiry, guided by the teachings of Vedanta. And just to be very clear, this is a very important topic because the fruits of self-knowledge is the goal. If we're not clear about the goal we seek, our efforts will be misdirected. This, unfortunately, seems to be a common problem in spiritual life in general, and that is so many spiritual seekers aren't very clear about what is the goal that they seek. Some are seeking some kind of mystical experience. Some are seeking some kind of siddhi, special power to raise their kundalini and all kinds of things, some of which are a little strange. When the goal is misunderstood, clearly your efforts will be misdirected. And if the goal is not clearly understood, then still our efforts can be misdirected. So this rather extensive section that Shankaracharya gives in the text is to make it extremely clear what is the goal we seek. Only when that goal is clear will our efforts, sadhana, spiritual practice, our spiritual practice will be properly directed only when the goal is clear. Okay, with that introduction, we continue where we left off. We finished verse 42. We continue with verse 43. Repeat after me. Atma tu satatam prapto, Atma tu satatam prapto, aprapta vada vidyaya, aprapya vada vidyaya, tannashe prapta vadbhati, tannashe prapta vadbhati, swakantha bharanam yatha, swakantha bharanam yatha. Shankara just makes it so clear. Atma tu satatam praptaha. Atma tu, but Atma, your true self, is satatam praptata. Satatam, always, prapta, acquired. Atma is always acquired. Atma is never remote from you. We've had this discussion on several occasions. You don't have to get Atma. You don't have to reach Atma. That Atma is your true nature. We've discussed this before. And I've quoted my guru, Pujya Swami Dayananda, who famously said, you already possess that which you want to possess. You already are that which you want to become. You said it so nicely. In more general terms, we always speak of your true nature being divine. You were born that way. You were born with that inner divinity, the inner divinity that on inspection is better understood to be Satchidananda Atma. It's your essential nature. It's who you are. It is satatam praptaha. It is eternally acquired. You always have it. But api, even though, you have to break the words apart. Api apraptavat avidyaya api. Even though apraptavat, as though not obtained, even the first line, Atma is always obtained, always present. That's a good translation. Atma is always present, but apraptavat, it seems like it's not present. It is as though absent, avidyaya, due to ignorance. So remember, we said that ignorance veils, as it were, your true nature. And to remember that very profound discussion, we said ignorance partially veils your true nature. You know you are a conscious being, but you don't know the true nature of that conscious being. You don't know that your being is unborn, uncreated, and unchanging. You don't know that your consciousness is all-pervasive, vast, and utterly untouched by any worldly trouble. So, in general, your true senses, your true nature is known as a conscious being, but the profound nature, being limitless, all-pervasive, unborn, etc., is not fully understood, avidyaya, due to ignorance. So that ignorance has a capacity to veil that inner true self. And he gives this is a metaphor that's given so often in scriptures and commentaries. In the last line, he says it is swakanta abharanam yata. So the situation is yata, just like abharana. Abharana is any kind of decoration, but in this case, some kind of necklace, which is swakanta, around your neck. So a necklace is around your neck, and it's just a two-word reference to a common story. And the story you may have heard is a lady who thought she lost her gold necklace. Not a mala like this. She lost a gold necklace, and she looked everywhere. She looked all over her home. She looked outside in the garden. She looked and looked and looked for her gold necklace. She couldn't find it anywhere. Why? Swakanta. It was around her own neck the whole time. She was looking for what she already possessed. This is the metaphor that's so commonly given in Advaita Vedanta. We spend our lifetimes looking for that which we already possess. We look for contentment, peace, and happiness. And what is the true source of that contentment, peace, and happiness? You already have that. It's your true nature. So this is the irony of life. Just like that lady spent all that time looking for the necklace that she already possessed, in the same way, we can spend our lifetime, in fact, lifetimes, we can spend looking for that contentment and peace, which is already possessed by you because it's your true nature. Fortunately, tan, in the third line, tan na she, when that ignorance is removed, praptavat bhati. Atma and the necklace, praptavat bhati, bhati, they appear, praptavat, as though acquired. Very nice language. That vat affix means like or as. So apraptavat in the third line, Atma seems to be absence due to ignorance, but then tanashe, when that ignorance is removed, praptavat bhati, it seems like it's gained. Just like the lady, when she finally figures out that the necklace has been around her neck the whole time, or when her husband points it out, she's delighted. And because, why is she so happy? She found her lost necklace. She found her lost necklace. She's always had it. Due to ignorance, she thought it was lost. When that ignorance is removed, her as though lost necklace is as though acquired. In the same way, when Atma, your true nature, seems to be absent, that fullness, completeness, vastness, perfection, perfect contentment may seem absent in your life due to ignorance. When that ignorance is removed, Atma, that fullness, perfection, contentment, seems to be acquired when in fact you've had it all along. Merely a matter of removing that veil of ignorance. Just one comment, it just pops into my mind somehow. So many people ask, how did we get into this ignorance in the first place? And some people even say, how did we forget our true nature? Well, it's not something you forgot. Nor is it something you got into. We had this discussion before. We are all born ignorant. That's just how life works. We're born as infants in a state of complete ignorance. As infants, we're ignorant of so many things, including ignorant of our true nature. We're born with that ignorance, and then either we live our lifetimes under the influence of that ignorance and we suffer so much, or with the help of these teachings, we can come out of that ignorance and become free. But we don't get into that ignorance in any way, nor do we forget our true nature. These are wrong ideas. I don't know where they come from. Okay. Next. Sthanau purushavad bhrantya, sthanau purushavad bhrantya, krita brahmani jivata, krita brahmani jivata, jivasya tattvike rupe, jivasya tattvike rupe, tasmin drishte nivartate, tasmin drishte nivartate. Shankara is using all the famous drishtantas. So we had the lady and her necklace, and now we have in a prior verse, and in this verse we have another famous metaphor. Before the metaphor, start in the second line. Brahmani jivata krita is the prose order. Brahmani, on Brahman, on reality, on your true nature, jivata, the state of being a limited, finite, individual being due to subject to suffering and struggle. That jivata, the state of being a samsari, the state of being a suffering, struggling, limited, individual person, jivata, that state, brahmani krita, is created upon your true nature. Brahmani, on Brahman, on your true nature. This status is created, or the word we've used before is superimposed. Due to ignorance, you superimpose the limitations of your body, mind, and senses are superimposed on your true nature, which is pure consciousness. We've discussed this before. What's new here is the metaphor. Wonderful metaphor. He says that we superimpose the limitations, I'm paraphrasing, we superimpose the limitations and problems of our bodies and minds, these limitations are superimposed on our true nature, which is Satchidananda Atma, just like sthanau. Sthanu is and it can have several meanings. Here it's a tree stump, has other meanings as well. Sthanau, on a tree stump, purushavat, just like a purusha is superimposed on a tree stump, bhrantya, due to ignorance, due to confusion, due to delusion. All those meanings are there for bhranti. Bhranti means delusion or ignorance. Bhrantya, due to ignorance, due to delusion. There's another famous metaphor, story. A small story goes along with this, and that is some fellow is going down the road in the evening. It's not full light, it's dusk. The sun is setting. And off on the side of the road, this traveler sees a thief hiding in the shadows, waiting to jump on him and steal all his money or worse. Of course, there's no thief hiding in the shadows. What this person has actually seen is a tree stump. In the dim light, the tree stump is mistaken for being a thief. Here, Purusha means person, but the person means not any person, but a thief in particular. So due to the dark conditions, this traveler superimposes a thief on a harmless tree stump. Due to bhranti, due to this mistake. Mistakenly, the person superimposes a thief on the tree stump. And the thief is the most undesirable thing to superimpose. You could have superimposed any number of other things could have been superimposed, but we have a tendency. Our worst fears get superimposed. Our worst fears occupy our minds. Everyone has a tendency for what's called, psychologists call it catastrophic thinking. We always think about the worst possible scenario. So for this traveler, the worst possible scenario is finding a thief on the way and being robbed or even killed by that thief. Catastrophic thinking. So the drishtanta, the metaphor, is just like a traveler, due to bhranti, due to a mistake, due to ignorance, superimposes his worst fears on a harmless tree stump. In the same way, due to ignorance, bhrantya, we superimpose jivata, the state of being a finite, limited individual, subject to all kinds of suffering. We superimpose the status, the problems of our bodies and minds, the limitations of our bodies and minds, all of that, bhrantya, due to an error in thinking, due to ignorance. It all gets superimposed, brahmani, on Brahman, on your true nature, Satchidananda Atma, pure consciousness. Fortunately, the good news is if the problem, how to say this, there's really good news here. If the problem is real, the solution will be difficult. If there really is a thief hiding out there, this poor traveler better be ready to defend himself or run away. If the problem is real. If the problem is not real, the solution is simple. If the problem is due to bhranti, error, mistake, delusion, ignorance, if the problem is not real, the solution is simple. If the problem is ignorance, the solution is knowledge. And that knowledge is So for the traveler, certainly, for the traveler, how difficult it would be for the traveler to defend himself or run away. How much easier it is for the traveler just to realize there's no thief at all. It's only a tree stump. So this is the good news. If the problem is not real, if the problem is due to ignorance, the solution is knowledge, which is what the second half says. Shankara says, Jivasya tatvike rupe tasmin drishte. Tasmin, when, drishte, when it is seen. And that can go in both directions. That can go for the drishtanta, when the tatvike rupe, when the tatvika, true, rupe, rupa, nature, when the true nature, tasmin drishte, when a true nature is seen, when the true nature of the tree stump is seen, the traveler's problem goes away. Here, when the true nature, jivasya, of the limited individual, the one who's watching this video right now, when the true nature of the individual person, jiva, when the true nature of the individual is seen, is discovered, is understood, is recognized, then what? Nivartate. Nivartate goes away. The problem goes away. This is the easiest problem to solve. It's the easiest problem to solve because the problem isn't real. If the problem was real, we're in real trouble. The problem is not real. The problem is ignorance. The solution is knowledge. That also shows, just to reflect again on the introduction, our brief introduction, knowing the goal determines the path, the sadhana, the spiritual practice. How many people fail to recognize, how many spiritual seekers fail to understand this fundamental teaching of Vedanta, that the problem, the root problem for suffering is ignorance. Not any kind of ignorance, but specifically ignorance of your true nature. I think it would be fair to say that the vast majority of spiritual seekers fail to understand this very basic and important teaching, that the problem is ignorance. And if the problem is misunderstood, then the solutions they will seek will be misdirected. So, for example, when you fail to understand that the essence, the nature of the problem, the basic nature of the problem is ignorance, when that is not understood, then someone will undertake a practice of meditation, or hatha yoga. Tell me, how much meditation will it take to remove ignorance? Meditation can make your mind very quiet. Meditation can make your mind very sattvic, very pure. Meditation can't remove ignorance. Knowledge removes ignorance, not meditation. Or someone who undertakes hatha yoga, does all these yogic practices and pranayama. I think I told you that joke before. Puja Swami Dayananda, my guru, tells the story that this poor fellow who practices so much hatha yoga and does this headstand, Shirasasana, headstand, yogic headstand they call it. Puja Swamiji used to observe that it makes the problem worse. How does it make the problem worse? He said, when you stand on your head, it makes the blood flow to your head. More blood makes your brain work more, But when your brain is under the influence of ignorance and it works more, he said you get even more confused. So this yogic headstand, according to Pujya Swamiji, makes the problem worse. It's a joke. Don't take it too seriously. The point is that meditation doesn't remove ignorance. Pranayama, breathing exercises, doesn't remove ignorance. These hatha yoga asanas don't remove ignorance. And in all honesty, prayer and puja in and of themselves don't remove ignorance. Now, they bless you in so many ways, and it's easy to argue that without prayer, without meditation, maybe without some pranayama, you won't be able to get that knowledge, which means that meditation, yoga, and prayer in and of themselves don't remove ignorance, but they're still crucial and even necessary to prepare you in such a way that you can gain knowledge. So we've had this discussion, I think, at the very beginning of this text. So, sadly, when too many spiritual seekers fail to understand that the basic problem of suffering is due to ignorance, failing to understand that, a lot of effort is expended in seeking the wrong solution. When the problem is understood properly, as being ignorance, then the solution is understood properly. Okay, enough said. Next. Tattvasvarupanubhavat, tattvasvarupanubhavat, utpannam jnanamanjasa, utpannam jnanamanjasa, aham mameti cha jnanam, aham mameti cha jnanam, badhate digbhramadivata, badhate digbhramadivata. Tattva swarupa anubhavat. And here we've got a language problem. Anubhava, many of you know, means experience. Anubhavat, because of the experience of what? Tattva swarupa, the swarupa, the true nature of your tattva, of your essence. Due to the experience, and I'm going to revise that translation in just a moment, but mostly anubhava is translated as experience, and you'll see in a moment, if you translate anubhava here as experience, you've got a problem. But to see the first half, tattva swarupa anubhavat, using the wrong translation, due to the experience of your true nature, jnanam utpannam, jnanam, knowledge of your true nature, utpannam, is born, arises. Due to the experience of your true nature, knowledge arises. Do you see the problem with that? If you translate anubhava as experience, remember our earlier discussions. Is Atma present in your experience right now or not? Remember, Atma is consciousness. The consciousness by which you know what's happening right now. That consciousness is fully present in this experience. There's no absence of the experience of consciousness. There's no absence of the experience of Atma. Atma, or consciousness, is present in any and all experiences. It's always present. It's always experienced. The problem here is one of translation. If you look up an English word in Webster's dictionary, you'll find many meanings. In the same way, if you look up a common Sanskrit word like anubhava, in a proper dictionary, you'll find several meanings, not just one. So we have to be intelligent enough to look for the right meaning. If you translate anubhava here as experience, you don't get the right meaning. Due to the experience of your true nature, you gain knowledge. You can see how wrong that translation is. So in this, yes, it's true. Anubhava usually means experience. Here, you cannot translate it as experience. So, tattva sarupa anubhavat. My translation here is after realizing your true nature, after recognizing your true nature, after discovering your true nature. You can use any of those words. All of them are fine translations for anubhava in this particular situation. Please remember, the meaning of any word is determined by context. You cannot translate a word out of context. So when the word anubhava is in this context that Shankaracharya gives, you cannot translate it as experience. Atma is always experience. Consciousness is always experience. It's never away from your experience. It's never remote. Therefore, proper translation here, tattva sarupa anubhavat. After realizing your true nature, after recognizing your true nature, after discovering your true nature, then what happens? Jnanam, knowledge, and remember jnanam is also bodha. Atma Bodha, the title of our text, Atma Jnanam, self-knowledge, Atma Vidya, self-knowledge, all of these are synonyms. That self-knowledge, utpannam, arises. And it arises anjasa, immediately. It doesn't take time for knowledge to arise. This knowledge is in a form of self-recognition. That's another translation for the top line. Tattva surupa anubhavat. After recognizing, in fact, that's probably the best translation. Tattva surupa anubhavat. After recognizing your true nature, utpannam jnanam. Knowledge arises anjasa, immediately. Self-recognition. How long does it take to recognize your true nature? Remember our lion story? When that lion looked at its reflection in the water, how long did it take the lion to recognize that it wasn't a lamb, it was a lion? That recognition takes place in a moment. When you look in a mirror, how long does it take to recognize yourself in the mirror? When you see a friend, how long does it take to recognize your friend? Recognition is instantaneous. Self-recognition is instantaneous, anjasa. That self-recognition, self-knowledge takes place when? Remember we said, the practice of Vedanta is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So during the practice of Shravana, listening to these teachings and using these teachings to guide your own process of self-inquiry. Through that process of self-inquiry, guided by these teachings, self-recognition takes place anjasa, immediately, in an instant. Now, in the prior topic, we talked about nididhyasana, and we discussed how many kinds of habitual wrong thinking linger. Even after the dawn of self-knowledge, even after this initial recognition takes place, there's still a lot of mental conditioning that needs to be addressed. That's why in our lion story, after seeing its reflection for the first time in the pond, it had to go and see its reflection again and again and again to remove its habitual thinking that it was a lamb. That removal of conditioning, of conditioned thinking, takes time. So notice, the initial recognition of your true nature is instantaneous. The process of assimilation, the process that takes place due to the practice of nididhyasana, the practice of removing all that habitual and conditioned thinking, that takes place over time. It takes time to remove, as we said before, the decades and decades of conditioning that have molded and affected our minds. It takes time to remove all that conditioning. But it takes no time whatsoever to recognize your true nature. Anjasa, immediately. Jnanam utpannam, knowledge arises. And when that knowledge arises, in the second half, aham mama iti cha ajnanam badhate. When knowledge arises, ajnanam. By the way, if you look up cha-jnanam in a dictionary, you'll be disappointed. 2 words, cha, and the word and connects the first half to the second half. Cha and ajnanam, ignorance, badhate, is destroyed, is negated. So when knowledge arises immediately, and immediately this ignorance is removed. So knowledge arises in an instant, and the instantaneous arising of knowledge removes ignorance in that same instant. What kind of ignorance? Aham mama. In 2 words, Shankara summarizes the whole thing. So he says ignorance is in the form of aham, I. And notice that in Sanskrit and in English, if you say I, the sentence isn't complete. You can't just say I. You can't just say aham. You have to say I am this or that or the other thing. I am a man. I am Swami Tadatmananda. I am this. I am that. Or in Sanskrit, aham requires a predicate. Aham is the subject, and it requires a predicate. So by saying aham, Shankara introduces all of these problems of identification with your body and mind. I am this body, I am this mind. So all of these problems born of ignorance are suggested with that one word, aham, and then one more word to include all the other problems. What is the second word? Mama, my. My is just like aham. You can't just say my. My what? My body, my mind, some, for many of you, my spouse, my children, my parents, it goes on and on. Wherever there's I or my, there's a problem. Many problems. Notice consciousness is not an I. Consciousness can't say, I am this or that or the other thing. Consciousness just is. Your consciousness just shines, illumining your mind, as it were. Nor does consciousness possess anything. Mama, My indicates possession. Consciousness is not identified with your mind or body. Consciousness is not possessed of anything whatsoever. This identification with the body and mind indicated by I, and this possession of house and family, etc., indicated by the word mama, my, all of these are evidence of ignorance. And all of that ignorance, ajnanam badhate, is removed. It is immediately removed. With the dawn of knowledge, ignorance gets removed. And it's a nice, we use that expression, dawn of knowledge, like the sun rising. And that leads into the metaphor. Suppose you're lost in the forest at night. You know your village lies to the east, but at night you have no way of knowing which way is east. So you spend the night in that dark forest waiting for dawn. And when dawn comes, when the sun arises, instantly you know which way is east. And that's the metaphor he gives. Dig brahmadi vat. Vat, just like. Dig brahma, etc. Dig, the word is dik, direction. Brahma, confusion. So dig Brahma is confusion about direction, simply being lost. Dig Brahmadivat. Just like being lost and confused about direction, it gets removed instantly as soon as the sun comes up, in the same way with the dawn of knowledge. Ignorance is immediately removed. And remember, the ignorance we're talking about is not an ordinary kind of ignorance. It's a particular ignorance that's the cause for all human suffering. You remove this ignorance, suffering comes to an end. Good. These verses are very simple, so we can proceed. Next. Samyak vijnanavan yogi, samyak vijnanavan yogi, swatmanyeva kilam jagata, swatmanyeva kilam jagata, ekam cha sarvamatmanam, ekam cha sarvamatmanam, ikshate jnana chakshusha, ikshate jnana chakshusha. The big vision of the enlightened person. Here, the enlightened person is called yogi. Yogi is one who has practiced not hatha yoga, although someone who practices hatha yoga, you can call him a yogi, fine. Yoga, remember, yoga is to become joined or united. Someone who has become joined or united with his or her true nature is that yogi. So that yogi, the one who has become united with his or her true nature as Satchidananda Atma, that yogi is samyak vijnanavan. That yogi is one who is vijnanavan, who possesses vijnana. Jnana means knowledge. Vijnana also means knowledge or special knowledge. Here, another adjective, samyak, correct or true. The yogi we're talking about is not someone who has mastered hatha yoga and pranayama and all of this stuff. The yogi we're talking about is someone who possesses vijnana, true, samyak vijnana, true and clear knowledge. The V prefix can mean clear, and the word samyak means true. So samyak vijnana, true and clear knowledge, is possessed by this particular yogi. And what is the nature of that samyak vijnana? Talking about the enlightened person. What is the vision of the enlightened person? How does the enlightened person see himself or herself? How does the enlightened person see the world around them? And Shankara says it very beautifully in this verse. He says, Samyak Vijnana Van Yogi, that enlightened person, Swatmani Eva Akhilam Jagat. You have to break the words apart. Swatmani Eva. Swatmani, in oneself, Eva, alone. Akhilam Jagat, Jagat, the world. Akhilam, the entire world. Akhilam Jagat, the entire world. And you have to pick up the verb from the last line. The verb that's in the last line applies to the first half and the second half. Ikshate, sees. So supplying the verb from the last line. The enlightened person, ikshate, sees, akhilam jagat, the entire world, swatmani, in oneself. It's a huge statement. What does it mean? The enlightened person sees the entire world within oneself. There are two ways of understanding this. First of all, the enlightened person recognizes oneself as being pure consciousness, consciousness that, as we discussed before, doesn't have an edge or size or boundary or limit. Therefore, consciousness which is boundaryless, limitless, consciousness which is all-pervasive. So the enlightened person is one who knows oneself to be all-pervasive consciousness. And within this all-pervasive consciousness, the universe exists. From science, we know that this universe in which we live today began with this Big Bang 14-some billion years ago. So the universe began with this explosion, and even now it continues to explode. It continues to expand. Just a funny observation. We live in the midst of an explosion. That explains something about the chaos and confusion we sometimes find in life. After all, we are literally exploding right now. Universe is exploding. But here's the point that relevant to this verse. The universe is expanding into what? Keep in mind that space exists only within the universe. There's no such thing as space outside the universe. So the universe explodes, the universe expands, expanding into what? Scientists will struggle with this. In fact, anyone will struggle with this. This is an incredibly profound and challenging inquiry. But with these teachings, according to Shankara, according to the ancient rishis, consciousness is all-pervasive. Therefore, the universe is expanding into consciousness, all-pervasive consciousness. And the enlightened person is one who knows that all-pervasive consciousness is my true nature, so this entire universe exists within that all-pervasive consciousness. This exploding, ever-expanding universe is expanding into consciousness. So in the vision of the enlightened person, Samyak Vijnanavan Yogi, that enlightened person, ikshate, sees. Sees in a metaphoric sense, not literally sees with your eyeballs. So the commentator says, Jnana chakshus. In fact, that's in the last line. Jnana chakshusha. The enlightened person, ikshate, sees, not with these eyeballs, but jnana chakshusa, with the eyes of wisdom. Chakshus, eye, jnana, knowledge. Jnana chakshusa, chakshusha, with the eyes of wisdom, with the eye of knowledge. The enlightened person, ikshate, sees akhilam jagat, the entire universe, as being swatmani eva, within oneself. What a vast vision, and that's only half of it. As vast as that vision is, it's only half of what's being communicated here, because the other half is indicated in the third line. Cha, and sarvam, everything that you see. In the second line, akhilam jagat, the entire universe. In the third line, sarvam, all of that is ikshate, it is seen as, it is understood as ekam atmanam, as one, and that one, ekam, one, which is atmanam, oneself. It is everything you perceive is understood as being one and as being yourself. This is the vast vision of Vedanta. Let me make it a little bit more clear. That all-pervasive consciousness happens to be the underlying reality because of which the universe exists. So that universe that's expanding into consciousness, that consciousness into which it expands is the underlying reality because of which it exists. The term I used before was fabric of existence. Consciousness is the very fabric of existence. Consciousness is the reality because of which everything exists, just like this pot exists because of clay. The universe exists because of an underlying substratum. That underlying substratum is that consciousness because of which you exist and I exist. The consciousness because of which you exist and I exist is the underlying reality because of which the cosmos exists. This is a vast vision. There's a name for this. They call it Sarvatma Bhava. Bhava, the state or condition of being Sarva Atma. The state or condition of being Atma, the self, of Sarva, of all. Sarvatma Bhava is the state or condition of being the self of all. And that vision of the enlightened person, jnana chakshusha, with the eye of wisdom, the enlightened person knows that let me try to express it in the first person. The enlightened person thinks like this: I am all-pervasive consciousness, unborn, uncreated, unchanging, all-pervasive consciousness, and that consciousness, which is my essential nature, is the underlying reality because of which the entire cosmos exists. Just as this pot exists because of clay, this universe exists because of an underlying substratum. And that underlying substratum is consciousness. The consciousness which is my own truth, my own true nature, my own reality. This is Sarvatma Bhava. This is the ultimate vision of the enlightened person. The culmination of all of one's sadhana is to gain this particular knowledge. And this knowledge is expressed in the Mahavakya, Tat Tvam Asi. You are that means what? You, your consciousness is, how simple, it's actually, I use all these fancy words, but truth, the ultimate truth is simple. Tat Tvamasi. Tvamasi. You are. Your consciousness is. Tat. That underlying substratum, that fabric of existence, because of which the cosmos exists. Tvam, your consciousness, asi, is. Tat, that fabric of existence because of which everything exists. This is Sarvatma Bhava, the state of being the self or essence of all. Okay. We'll stop here. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.